So hello everyone, and welcome back to movie time. In this case, it's a bit of a series time. I'm here today with my friend Bryce.
Thanks for having me.
You'll probably have to get up closer to the mic there. Or you can just, oh, hellfire. Go away, alarm. Okay, I don't know if that even picked up at all, but we are here today to talk about the Netflix Castlevania series. Both seasons right now available, and why I kind of hate this series.
My personal, the way I look at it and I feel about the show is it kind of feels like that drug dealer that's like, hey man, here's this, the first taste for free. And then when you come back to him for more, it's like, I'm out. They give you just enough to get you hooked into it, really like, okay, I feel it. I see what the show's about. And then it's over.
See, I didn't even get that with everything that was going on with this. We're playing Lords of Shadow right now, and I don't remember being this far in the game, and I have no idea what the controls are, what they do, and I'm just kind of winging it from here, so... Ow. Anyway, with Castlevania, the show, a lot of people make the joke, the movie, the game, and I feel like that Castlevania should be the game, the show, because it feels like it's from a game. And I don't like to say that in a bad term, or I don't want it to feel like it's coming from a bad term that way, but it really kind of feels bad when I watch it, because I love Castlevania. I played a lot of the games when I was a kid on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Wonderful games. Personally, I think Symphony of the Night was the best of the series, though. Which I don't think I would be horribly wrong in thinking, but...
Seems to be the main consensus with most of the fan
base. It does,
base.
and it seems to be where they drew a lot of their inspiration for things going on and happening within the series itself. So
I take this with the grain of salt here, but I believe I read somewhere online them talking about that's going to be the inspiration for further going up seasons, as they're going to try to draw heavily from that game.
Yes. I just went ahead and stopped playing because it's a huge distraction, and I'm not going to get any talking done if I do that. So we're on regular old podcast time now. So I went into Castlevania fairly open-minded. I really wanted to like the series. I wanted it to be good. I like the animation. I am not a huge fan of Warren Ellis, but he's done some good things writing wise in the past, and so I was like, yeah, I'll put my reservations on hold, and I'll try to enjoy this series. And the first season was so fucking boring. I sat through the first season, and by the time I got to the end, I was just like, oh, it's done. And me and Jared actually did a review of season 1. If for those who would like to see, I'll include a little link in the video right now. But season 2 rolled around, and I was like, okay, a lot of just about everything in season 1 was exposition, and that's all been gotten out of the way. Now we can get on to Trevor Belmont in this one. Was it?
Yes.
Okay, we can get on to Trevor Belmont and his party. If you got to move the mic closer to you, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh,
not that way.
Okay,
there we go.
Technical difficulties. Yeah, position it. Oh, that's gonna sound great. Oh God, it's still tipping. Okay. We've got this now. We've got it. Yeah, phone will balance. I figured, okay, season 2, Trevor Belmont and his sidekicks, Alucard and Saris? That's wrong. I know that's from Helsing. Sifa. That's it. There. Yeah. Apparently the phone really was balancing the table out. So all three of them, the mage, the fighter, and ostensibly the paladin of the group, could, if you want to break it down into terms, I think are more universal to tabletop gaming, which is on our minds right now because we're about to go play some D&D. All of those three characters are now on the quest to stop Dracula and his horde from running roughshod over the land. Just to recap with season 1, I did not enjoy it. The final fight that it builds to is decent, but I don't think is worth all the extra padded BS in between. I thought the overall bad guy for the beginning, for the first season, i.e. the Catholic Church, was basically just like a straw man style antagonist. And they were just like, oh, we're the church and we are right, therefore we will burn you at the stake as a heretic. By the way, we employ thieves and rapists and assassins. Which, again, I know they totally did. I 100, and this is me speaking, I'm a Christian, I'm Presbyterian to be specific, technically non-denominational, but if you had to lump me in a category, I know all about that shit. I know they 100% did, and the Catholic Church has done some really fucking awful things. But even with that knowledge, it felt horribly one-dimensional as far as an antagonist goes. And there was just no reason for me to care when Dracula starts dicing people up.
I agree with you on that. I think the church could have been used more effectively if we'd have had a longer run and they were allowed to stay around. But the main bad guy that they set up, the couple episodes we had him, he was building up like he was going to use this as an excuse to take power in the church.
Yes.
And like, had they kept him around, had he not immediately died, and we got to see that transition of him like going up the ranks of the church, I think he could have been a more formidable bad guy.
Yes.
But like I said at the beginning, with the problem I think is the show is they don't allow time for anything to happen.
Which is really weird because I could understand that if it was a standard series production. There's time constraints, there's limitations to your budget, but all of this is meant to be put out as soon as it's all ready, and so you don't really have to have this time not a time crunch, but this constriction on your creativity that most anime productions have, and it just really felt weird.
It's weird to me because it's like, oddly enough, it's like the one anime that like could probably use some filler.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to say about an anime.
Because the story of Castlevania is amazingly simple. The Belmonts fight Dracula. And that's about it. Like it or not, that story really could use some filler to it. It could use some extra meat in the potatoes.
I like some of the introduction of the new vampire characters that we got in this season.
Yes.
Can't remember his name, but the Viking guy was a particular favorite.
Yes. The one voiced by Peter Stormare.
Yes.
Yeah, he was enjoyable. He was fun.
And I think that's what this series needs more of. It's just some quirky cast to fill out the fact that the show really, plotline-wise, is only about Trevor, Alucard, and Dracula.
Right. No, you're 100% right on that. I also feel that giving Dracula some more screen time besides sitting in a chair and brooding would have been much more helpful because there's not a lot of reason for me to care about Dracula and his woes. I mean, when you meet him, he's alone in his castle And I guess he meets this woman who's like, oh, you're not a horrible demon monster, you're scientists. Even though you drink the blood of the innocent and you garnish this reputation by actually admitting to being Vlad Tepes Dracul, a man who impaled people outside of his house to try and ward off people coming to trick-or-treat for UNICEF, or I don't know what the fuck he was doing. But, I mean, we have historical record. This man was a monster. Like, even disregarding any of the whole supernatural BS that surrounds him, he was a straight-up psychopath.
In historical context, he's actually, to the Transylvanian people, he's considered a hero. Because he kept them from being invading and overridden entirely by the Turks. I'm not saying that I abide what he did, but to them, he's a hero because he kept them out of Turkish.
Yes, but if you allow for that, you can also make the argument that Stalin is a hero to the Russian people, and therefore their view is just as valid about a man who committed atrocities far worse than a lot of the Nazi party did.
We can acknowledge their opinion and not admit it that it's right.
This is true. I'll work with that. That's actually a tenet I try and abide by a lot. But okay, well we'll agree on that. That Dracula, by Transylvanian standards, a land that no longer exists, was considered a hero. I know technically it exists.
It's like Romania. It's part of Romania.
It's part of Romania, I think. But yeah. All I'm saying is that you don't exactly have all these stories circulate around you for nothing. There has to have been catalyst to start out Dracula being a terrible, terrible individual.
I see where you're going with this, and I feel like the season could have been given a lot to that duality. If we could have seen that side of him when he's this evil dragon, dark side of the things that he's done in the war, and I also would have liked to seen more of him with his wife. Also, kind of want to see a timeline for like, okay, how long were you married? Is she a vampire too?
Well, it's established that she's not. It's established that she is not. But yes, it would have been very nice and helpful to have a timeline for whatever the fuck was happening with them.
Yeah, like did Alucard just bam and then bam? He's full grown now. How actually old is he?
Right.
Because he's got this like, yeah, I've been around for a little bit, but looking at the timeline that they're presenting us, it doesn't feel like he's more than like 10 years old, maybe?
Well, that's kind of the issue. In the first season, you see Dracula marry his wife, and then he leaves. And you don't really have a sense of how long they were together and how long he was essentially guarding her. Guarding in quotes, because it seems almost exactly when he leaves,
the shit goes down.
Everything goes down. It's almost like they were waiting for him to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that this old woman who Dracula met in season 1, who tells him that the Catholic Church came and fucked his shit up with his wife, may have tipped the Catholic Church off to her being a witch or something, even though she's profiting and getting benefits from her healing.
No, that was a different woman.
That was different. Okay.
Because she was the woman telling her, like, yeah, what she was giving you was, like, foot scrapings.
Okay.
The medicine that the other witch doctor, whatever, before.
Right.
Dracula's
okay. Like I say, I had a really hard time getting through season 2. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that nothing happens in season 2 until the very last episode. Well, the next to last episode. And a lot of it stems just from them going back and forth on issues that we already know about. We already know that Trevor, Alucard, and Sela are stomping new buttholes in all of Dracula's minions. We know this. And yet we spend half an episode with the vampires re-acknowledging that these three are just wiping the floor with them. And there are shots that just go on for way too long. You get the point about almost a third of the way into it. I'll jump ahead to the end when Carmela takes one of the Forge Masters. and she just starts beating him up. And beating him. And beating him. And beating him. I'm just sitting here, I'm like, we already know she's a dick. You're not giving me anything new for information, but I know you're not going to kill him. I already know that you enjoy torturing individuals for your own twisted pleasure. I already know that you essentially you get off on being cruel. So having this happen at the very end is really nothing more to further the story. It's just them sticking this because I don't think they had anywhere else to stick it. And yeah, that I don't. Let's go ahead and get into the characters then, because I actually do think that they flesh out the main three at least a little better than the first season. That being said, they do it in like short bursts, and the rest of it is peppered out with Alucard and Trevor Belmont just sniping at each other.
I really enjoyed the little, like, I don't remember, it might have even been the first episode when they were like playfully making fun of each other in the snow before they left the city.
I think so. I'm gonna go ahead and say yes. I'm not sure. I've been trying to watch this almost since it came out, and I just got done with it like yesterday. I could not force myself to sit down and stay awake through this long enough to get to a point where I would say, okay, I'm done with it now.
With the time that they're allowing this, I feel like, because it's like 4 episodes, or was it 8 episodes?
It's 8 episodes for season 2, 4 for season 1.
With the limited time that they're giving us, I feel like this would have worked better as a kind of like what they did when they rebuilt the Berserk series where they did movies. I feel like that the way that they're going about this would have worked staging wise better as a.
That is actually a wonderful idea because I hate those movies, but I think it would work wonders.
Just part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yes,
2 hours at once. Bam, bam, bam.
Yes,
this episode, like with the amount that they're telling, like.
With all the information you're trickled and how much bloat there is in between, I honestly think that would be a very, very good idea. Like I said, because there's just large parts where they either just go back and reaffirm what we already know and then bicker about it some more, or they just kind of talk back and forth with absolutely nothing in between. But that being said, I want to talk more about what they don't say in this, which is mostly all of Dracula's entirely not their lines. Because for the most part, all Dracula does is sit there and brood. And it becomes very evident fairly quickly that he has no intention of actually winning this fight that he started against humanity. Like, he has been hurt and he wants to die. Whether he acknowledges it or not, that is what he wants.
This is him lashing out.
Exactly.
Like a child having a temper tantrum.
Yes, which is sad because Dracula is supposed to be this very tactical-minded, genius fighter person, and yet he acts like a petulant child. And it really kind of sucks because if he's going to allow his vampire commanders, Peter Stormare and Carmella are the big two that really take point in this. Which I have things to say about Carmella, but I'll hold off on that until later. And both represent different parts of the vampire. Peter Stormare's character is a Viking who represents the more animalistic side, I think, and how he revels in the destruction and the bloodbath that they are able to create with their fantastical powers.
I do love, the thing I love about his character is that he's not this suave, slick back hair, fancy suit, ooh, I'm a vampire,
yes,
let me seduce you and drink your blood. He is just in it to be in it. He wants to fight or fuck or make a boat out of it.
Yes.
According to his line. He's just, like, I don't feel like being a vampire has really changed him that much.
Right. No, that is a perfect representation for that side of it, and I like his character. That I like the dynamic they had between him and Carmilla, because Carmilla represents the exact opposite of that. She's the very high society, elegant individual who uses her guile and charm supernaturally to get what she wants.
And he's more the just raw power bloodlust.
Exactly, which I think could have created an interesting power dynamic if you ever actually saw them at each other's throats. But instead, they're constantly talking to Dracula behind the other's back, but they both know that they're talking behind the other's back. And you never really get this sense of tension. Because you know Dracula's not going to do anything. And I never once got the sense that they were going to do anything to the other. And so I wasn't intrigued by anything that was happening on screen between those two. Which also comes down to Dracula just kind of being there. This should be really great insight into Dracula's mind and what he's going through emotionally. This person who has lived for an untold number of lifetimes finally found someone to care about, who looked past whatever horrible atrocities he did. Let's go ahead and say, for the sake of argument, he did horrible atrocities to protect his homeland, Wallachia, during an invasion of some kind. And like that's the legends are true. He made a pact with the devil, gained these fantastical powers for the exchange of his soul, and has since made many, many other vampires throughout his long life. And he regrets it. Well, maybe not regret, but he sees the actions of youth and the impetuousness that he exhibited. And so he retires himself, for lack of anything else to do, to live out the remainder of his cursed immortality in his Krull castle. Because that is all I got out of the castle teleporting. It's just like, oh right, someone else probably watched Krull and thought that was a neat idea too. So, in comes this woman who looks past his past, and sees this man who has tried to help create things, to further science, when a bunch of other individuals in power are exploiting ignorance and stupidity. And he starts to care for her. They have a child, and he starts becoming more. The problem is you never see him become more. He starts out as an isolated and angry individual who loses somebody. And that's about where he stays up until the final confrontation with Alucard. Is cold and withdrawn.
Yes, I feel like he's still in the, I don't remember which of the 5 stages, but the pouty stage of...
Yeah.
And I just want to see him come out of that, like, okay, I want to see pissed off Dracula. I want to see...
I'm gonna get to this, because there's something I want to talk about with that. Because you get that very, very briefly in the final episode, which I, honest to God, loved the hell out of. The next to last episode, when they have that final fight where they all go in and storm Dracula's castle. It's great. The animation is fluid and perfect. It doesn't look choppy. And I was just like, this is great. Where was this?
Where's the rest of this?
Where was the rest of this? I do think it's rather convenient that, I know this is probably a throwback to the games, but, Trevor finds the, Morning Star in a already broken open bookcase underneath his family's destroyed house, but everything else in the library is perfect and fine. Except there's this broken open bookcase with a treasure chest in the back of it that no one has taken, has not been disturbed, and for whatever reason, there's an open bookcase, and I'm just, every time I looked at it, I was like, why is the bookcase open? Nothing else is broken. Everything else is fine.
Yeah, they acted as if it had been burnt down.
Well, the manor had been burnt down upstairs, which was fine. I was like, all right, whatever. Your stupid obsession with the Catholic Church being the bad guy in this, even though they're not a bad guy, it's not enough that Dracula is trying to destroy the world because somebody murdered his wife. That should be basically all the oomph you need for people to stop Dracula, or for people to not want the world to end, but instead you have to throw in that extra drama with this group of people that doesn't even really work in the end. At least personally, I don't feel it works. And once you get through all that, you finally get this really badass fight scene. And everybody shows off what they can do, like Alucard mentally controls the sword all over the place and slices through vampires. The Morning Star whips around and smashes into vampires, and they explode and they damage other vampires. And I'm like, God, this would have been fucking amazing to watch. Why am I only getting one episode of it? But you finally go through all that, and you finally get to Dracula, the big bad fight. And I'm like, all right, well, they basically walked through everybody else. So this is going to be like that sort of next level up boss fight where you have to exert yourself a little bit. And I was so pleasantly mistaken in how Dracula just basically walks through people and just starts delivering the world's worst beatdown on everybody. And I was like, God, why couldn't we have gotten more of this?
They were not ready for him in any way, shape, or form.
No, and it goes through a wonderful extended fight sequence between him and Alucard trading blows, because effectively Alucard is the only person who can actually stand against Dracula in a physical sense. And it's a great fight scene, and it all culminates in Dracula and Alucard. Man, that's a weird statement to say. It all ends with Dracula and Alucard standing in Alucard's old room when he was a child. And everything just finally crashing down on Dracula, and it finally emotionally paying off for what should have been building up and brewing underneath the surface of all this. In how, in my head, Dracula should have been going through his thoughts and saying, I had all of this and it was taken from me, and he finds reasons to continue being this horrible person, even though he has two human allies who believe in and support him entirely. All of humanity is to blame, and he has to invent reasons to keep going on this crusade of his. Fun fact, this is actually the same problem I had with Metal Gear Solid 5, in that this should have been the most perfect story of Big Boss having to convince himself that the ends continue to justify the means. Child soldiers justify his war that he's waging. And just see him sink lower and lower to these depths until eventually you get to the person that he was when you meet him in Metal Gear. And that's what I think should have happened here. You go through and you see Dracula constantly battling himself internally to try and convince himself that this is a necessary evil that must happen, that they don't deserve the kindness that she would have shown. And you don't get any of that. And so when you finally do get the emotional break at the end with Dracula and Alucard, it doesn't feel quite as good as it ought. Which isn't to say that the actors do not deliver a fantastic performance in that scene. But it just kind of feels hollow, because you never had a reason to emotionally care for Dracula.
Yeah, it's just... I know I keep coming back to this, but that's just... Really, that's all it is just there's not enough.
Right. Which is even more sad, because in the wrap-up episode, which had more endings than I think Return of the King did, You go through and you find out what happens to everybody. One of Dracula's Forge Masters, he's shoved in a desert, and he comes across a bunch of bandits who obviously try to rape and eat him, because it's a Warren Ellis story, and what the fuck else are they going to do to a guy wandering in a desert by himself? So he kills them and starts forging new monsters to wage his own war, supposedly. The other Forge Master that sided with Carmella gets trapped by her. Big surprise. She's a sack of shit and betrays him. And that's when you get to the scene I mentioned where she just starts beating the shit out of a chained man. And it's just like, I already know all of what you're telling me. You're not introducing anything new. You're just extending a scene pointlessly. But all of it finally culminates in Trevor Belmont and Sifa. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. They decide to leave and part ways with Alucard, and and Trevor tells Alucard, is like, look, your dad's castle is parked on top of my family's bullshit library here. I don't need it. You take it and do what you will with the world. And they go off, and you're left with Alucard in this giant, empty mansion. And you do get a bit of really good exposition about how he looks through the house, and he goes around, and it's empty and quiet, and the footsteps just echo everywhere. And he begins to ponder, is this what you felt like, living here by yourself? And you can kind of see where he starts to look at things how Dracula might have looked at them. And he starts seeing flashbacks of himself as a child, and it's meant to be implied that he is seeing this effectively from his father's perspective. He sees his wife, who he will never have again, a child that he pushed away and tormented and forced him to kill him. And he finally breaks at the end, and he just sits down and sobs. And it's a very emotional scene. It's well done. It's well animated. It's conveyed with little dialogue and all through the visuals. And I live for that kind of stuff. I love a good emotional scene that does not require the people to say a word and conveys everything you need to know. And I was just like, again, I just have to throw up my hands and say, where was this for anything else? Like, just a scene or a few scenes of Dracula doing this, but then becoming angry and finding that resolve to carry on would have gone miles towards helping make the character feel more fleshed out and three-dimensional. I guess that's all. He agrees. Sean is right. Once again, I am proven victorious in all things. All in all, I hear people talk about this, and they're like, oh, it's the greatest video game adaptation ever. And I'm like, that's not really a high bar to cross. Like, the most difficult thing you have to actually get past is Mortal Kombat. And Mortal Kombat is only just okay. As a video game movie. Although personally, I think Street Fighter, the movie, is the far superior video game movie. But that is a topic for another day. And people keep saying, they're like, oh, this is great. The characters are wonderful. They're so complex and deep. And I'm just like, did we watch the same movie? Because what they did in, let's see, it's like 45 minutes to an episode. Mm-hmm. Like the first season is 3 hours, so like 7.5 for the second season. Grand total of like 10 hours. A grand total of 10 hours. The story of Dracula and Alucard is told so much more succinctly and well in Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust between D and Meyerlink. And Meyerlink embodies both the things that Peter Stormare's character did, Dracula's character did, and the character of Carmela, even though Carmela is actually in this, in Vampire Hunter D, he embodies all those things. And he pulls it off so much better in such a shorter amount of time. And I just really question whether or not a better script doctor should have been brought in. And I think we could have cut out a lot of the fat and had a much, much nicer, like you said, just releasing them as movies, like 2-hour out of whack movies, would have been almost borderline perfect. Kind of like how they're doing with the Godzilla movies.
Yeah, like
that Netflix
we're
is
not
also
going to be
producing.
giving enough time to fully expand and put further plot lines out there and elaborate. Let's just get to the point. Let's just cut out what little bullshit there is and just get to the point then.
Exactly.
It's like it was dipping its toe in the water, but it never fully jumped in.
Yes, and that is probably the most maddening thing, is you get little hints of what they could be doing, but they're like, yeah, no, we're not gonna.
So yeah, I refuse to call this, it's still good, but I agree with you, I don't want to call this, I still don't think there's been a great video game movie. I think this is like the great video game movie that could have been.
Yes.
Or series that could have been.
I'll work with the series. It could have been a great video game series, and unfortunately it just kind of falls flat. Well, those are just our opinions, and as I always say, opinions are truly subjective. What did you guys think out there? Did you like it? Did you not? Or are we just two blowhards sitting on a couch talking shit? Leave a comment down below, and if you enjoyed this, hit that like and subscription, and we'll try and do some more. Until next time, everybody. Laters.